do. I'm not, again, I'm not all things to all people, but I teach, I speak, I train leadership development, mentoring programs, personal growth, and more importantly, relational leadership. And I do travel across the country as well as internationally, and with a deep dive into relational leadership, because I believe that people go along with people they get along with and that they like. And we all give out vibes, we all give out energy, and all of your student athletes. We partner with a lot of athletic associations across the country, as well as the National Federation of High Schools. So we are on a lot of campuses. We work with a lot of student athletes, as well as coaches, administration, corporate, in this lane. Again, not all things to all people, but so my goal today is to give you some tips and some mindsets for connecting, because we're so disconnected. And you would probably agree with me that that we have an abundance of disconnectedness, not only with one another, but with ourselves, and a scarcity of humanity. Because we don't know how to behave, we don't have that confidence. And so I don't have, for today, I don't have fancy PowerPoints for you. I'm going to give you some bullets. I believe less is more sometimes. It's things that you can bring to your athletes. And again, it's not just for the female athlete, although we're going to focus, I'm going to give you some stuff on just the female athlete. Of course, myself being a female athlete, I raised athletes. I raised hockey players, but not tennis players. But and so I'm not sure if you have heard, there's a gentleman that I wanted to, and maybe you could raise your hand or do a shout out if you've ever heard of Dr. Daniel Amen. Has anybody ever heard of Dr. Daniel Amen? Okay. Dr. Daniel Amen is a really good resource for you all. And he does a lot on brain health. He's phenomenal. He has a podcast. He has a new book coming out. I think it's called Raising Mentally Strong Kids. And of course, nothing. This is whether your own kids, but also the ones that we're coaching and training. And so he came out with some statistics. Are we spelling the name? The name, Amen, A-M-E-N, actually. So it's Dr. Daniel Amen, A-M-E-N. And he just came out, the CDC just came out with a study that's kind of sad, but that's why we're here. Because you can't support what we don't know. And so we want to also go into giving tools to equip us to help them become their next best version. And the percentage that just came out, 54% of teenage girls right now are persistently sad. 54%. 32 have thoughts of killing themselves with suicide. 24 have planned it, and 13 have tried. And we say, well, that's astonishing, right? That's crazy. But those are the stats that are out there, and some of these are your female athletes. And a lot of it that he equates to is because, unfortunately, we live in a toxic society. If you think about it, what is the food that they eat as teenagers, or the younger, even before reaching their teenage years? What is the food that they're eating? It's the fast foods, it's on the roads, it's toxic. The products that we might be placing on our bodies, and the scrolling of the social media, as we all know, right? And the social media is it's such a self-absorption of self, and it's really hard to be team when we're self. What about me? So what I like to do is I like to talk a little bit about relational leadership. And by the time I'm done, this should all make sense because they're so relationally conscious. And I know you're their coach, right? I'm fortunate that I had a teacher who was a coach who gave me a little push, and maybe at the end I'll share a little bit of the value in that. But to plan about the lack of confidence that we're having, the stress that's high, the anxiety, it's because we're so relationally conscious, but we're self-absorbed because of the social media that we're scrolling on, and then we're going into comparison mode. So those of you that have folks, that you're leading these teams and any other things that you're doing, let's just talk about relational leadership for a foundation as to where we're going to go with some information. So I summarize leadership in one word, as we stated, that I'm a certified speaker, coach, and trainer through the Maxwell Leadership Organization. That's a world-renowned organization he's the guru of leadership. And we define leadership in one word. And these are simple things, again, that you can maybe take 5 minutes every time, before a practice or after a practice. Or if you have captains, work with your captains and having some common language that you can run away with. And so let's define what leadership is, because we know that when we say, oh, be a better leader, they're like, they don't know how. And you're also dealing with kids who have come out that never had the experience of having effective leadership. And clearly we know in our world, we're not even seeing effective leadership. We're not going to go there today. So we define leadership in one word, and that word is influence. We believe that leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. Leadership is influence. So type in the chat influence if you want to type in the chat. And if you don't, then just say influence in your head. But leadership is influence. But here's what I mean by that. For us to understand, if leadership is influence, then based on our behavior, how we come across, our eye contact, our body language, right? Our body, all the things. So if leadership is influence based on our behavior, how we come across, you have the ability to make other people think, feel, and act a certain way. So say those three things: think, feel, and act a certain way. What we want everybody to understand is that we're all that powerful. That's that vibe. That's that energy that we give off. And we give off vibes and energy. And in the universe, we feed off of vibe and energy. And so if leadership is influence based on your behavior, how you come across, you have the ability to make other people think, feel, and act a certain way. Not only are our teammates, but this is all for us as well. This is for you. This is for me, to have us slow down and have you think about things. So I want you to do me a quick favor. I want you to take out your pointer finger, and if you're on screen, you can do this. And if you're not on screen, you can still do this. You can just do it on your own, but I want you to take out your pointer finger, and like Mom says, don't point at anybody. It's not nice. But if you were to raise your hand up really high up to the ceiling and point up at the ceiling, look at you all doing this. I'm so impressed. Good job, y'all. And so if you look up at the ceiling, imagine you have a clock, right? And if there's a clock up there, what color is your clock? Is it red, pink, green? All kinds of colors. And so find the 12, Roman numerals, plain, I don't know, but find the 12 on your clock. You find your 12, you see it, you're looking up at it. And if you come down to the 3, drop down to the 6, go up to the 9, and then back to the 12. 3, 6, 9, 12. Go around the face of your clock, go around in circles. And what direction are you going? I'm going to read your lips. Tell me what direction you're going. Clockwise, yes, you're going, and you gotta look up at it, so you're going around clockwise, right? And so 3, 6, 9, 12, I love Deb Hult, but bend your, that was good, I heard you say that. So bend your elbow and start bringing it down. Keep going around the face of your dial, and then go ahead and look over your finger. So look over it, not over, not of it, over it. Keyword is over. Keep going around the face of your dial, and what direction are you going? Counterclockwise. It's not this. So if you start here and you keep going around the face of your dial and you keep going and then you lean over it, now you're going counterclockwise. This is when it takes us another minute where people go, whoa, that's so tricky. Whoa, whoa. So you can mess with your students on that one, or anybody at home. But sometimes we can take a topic or a subject that we think we're so familiar with. Leadership, I got that. Just lead. Okay, that was easy, but we don't know how. So sometimes we can take a topic or a subject, think that we're very familiar with, like leadership, like mentoring, like mental health, like anxiety, like stress, and we can look at it from a different perspective. Then sometimes it can take on a whole new meaning. And so when we're talking about the mental health of our student athletes, let's look at this maybe from a different perspective today in reference to, what does relational leadership have to do with anything? Well, if leadership is influence, then based on our behavior, how we come across, we have the ability to make other people think, feel, and act a certain way. Keeping it that simple, right? But here's the good news. A lot of people think that, and I also want to talk about what leadership is not. So let's talk about what leadership is not. So again, you have some common language, because leadership is not about positions and titles. No, we all have them. I'm not taking away anybody's position or titles. We have captains, co-captains, all the things. But can you be effective in leadership without a title? And of course, the answer is yes, right? So it's not about positions or titles, not that we're taking away from you. And it's also not about seniority or status, right? You have older students that are on some of your teams and younger students, and that's awesome. They earn the right to. We're talking about the attitude towards it. Right. So in a lot of our high schools, I was a freshman who was able to be on a varsity team as a freshman. I was a 3-season sport athlete, and I was a freshman. Softball was my thing, and so I played as a freshman on the varsity team. And typically, how do older students or older athletes treat the younger athlete? You get the dummies. You get the water bottles, you get the pucks, bring them over here. And again, we don't mind doing it, but it's the attitude towards it. And guess what? Your kids are too smart these days. That just doesn't work anymore. And so it's just the attitude towards it, not to take away from it. But in what I don't understand, and this is what something we preach across the country, is like, listen, they're your teammates. Why are you being so mean? They're your teammates. And of course, we're all for tradition, because they'll say, well, it's tradition. Well, but if you're taking away one's dignity, I'm not really for your type of tradition. It's the attitude towards that. And I also agree that I will probably say things that you have heard before, but like mom says, some things just bear repeating, and that's one of them. They're on your team. Why are you putting them in the hot seat down in the basement during spaghetti dinners, right? And so those are some things, but here's the good news. The good news is this. Anybody like good news? I like good news. The good news is that leadership is a learnable and practicable skill, right? How many of us are better at something now than we were 10 months ago? And why is that? Because of our investment of time, right? And leadership is the same thing. The skill set, right? The position that we play, it's our investment of time, because the more we practice, obviously, the better we get. And this is all the same thing. But we have lost the sight of slowing down and having an understanding what leadership is and what leadership's not. And then because we are relationally conscious, especially your females and female athletes. It's all about the relationship. So let's talk about the good news, because leadership is a learnable and practicable skill. And leadership is something we do with people, not to people. So it's a learnable, practicable skill, something that we do to people. I mean, that we don't do to people, we do with people. And if leadership is influence, then our ability and our willingness, because can you be able but not willing? The answer is yes, right? Can you be willing but not able? And the answer is yes. So when we put the two together and we have our ability and our willingness to establish meaningful and intentional relationships, that's taking a few minutes, maybe before practice. Every time you take 5 minutes and have everybody go do a meet. Hey, tell me one good thing about what happened today. And that you're being conscious about having them look people in the eye. That we're going to talk about confidence in a minute, but to look them in the eye, slow down, so that their identity is not attached to a tennis racket and a ball and the game, that their worth comes from who they actually are, because they can't control the outcome, right? My kids, I raised hockey players. Like, you can't control the outcome. If that puck went off your skate and it just happened to go into the net, you can't control that. That's an uncontrollable. That's that outcome you cannot control. What you can't control is your attitude towards that, right? And so when we take our ability and our willingness to establish meaningful and intentional, putting intentionality in, taking a few minutes to slow down, to build connections. And not just talk about the weather, and not just talk about tennis, but talk to them about what else is important to them. And then when we do that, that will determine our leadership effectiveness. That's with a capital E. That determines our leadership effectiveness, because people go along with people they get along with and that they like, and they give out a vibe. But that doesn't mean they have to be best friends. They don't even have to follow each other on social media, right? But that takes courage. That takes the ability to have some confidence. And so as we're building those meaningful and intentional relationships with your student athletes, and this is with you and your coaches, if you have other coaches, this is you coach to player, player to player, team to team. And so if we are mindful when we're building these relationships, there are 3 questions that I want us to understand that subconsciously go through our minds when we're trying to build these connections. These 3 questions are not only questions that people are asking about you, if you're looking to coach them, if you're looking to lead them, because again, we are relationally conscious. So not only are these questions in their minds, but when we put ourselves in positions to be led by other people, these 3 questions go through our mind as well. And question number one is pretty simple. It's like, do you care about me? Because we're so, and especially with your female athletes, that mental health is, we really want to, do you really care about me? Does your behavior show that you actually care? And so what do we do to show that we care? Do we yell all the time? Do we always focus on what they do wrong versus what they do right? How do we show that we care? So that's question number 1. How do we show that we care? Question number 2 is, what can you do for me? If I'm going to follow you, if I'm going to be led by you, if I'm going to be open to having you coach me, then what is it that you can do for me? And what I mean by that is not, can you pick me up for practice? Maybe once in a while, if you're allowed to, and it doesn't mean, hey, can you go do my laundry for me? Or, hey, can you pick up some water for me while you're there? But it's actually, what value are you going to add? Why is my life going to be better because I'm coached by you, because you're my teammate? What is the value? And that's a whole values workshop that can be done. We do that with a lot of teams, doing a whole values workshop on understanding values, because that's what builds positive relationships, right? That's what builds positive teams. And so what is it that you can do for me? How is my life better because of you being in it? And it doesn't mean you have to babysit me, right? But do you smile at me? Do you listen to me? Do you slow down and you not trying to top that story on me? And do you remember that I had a test last week and you actually slowed down and, hey, by the way, how'd you do on that math test? D in geometry one time. Anybody? I know, it's just not my thing. But and then the third one is, of course, is that question that you get asked all the time is, the third question is, can I trust you? Can I trust you? So for question number one is, do you care about me? Number two is, what can you do for me? How do you add value to me? And then number three is, can I trust you? And we can't just say, of course you can trust me, I'm good people. Well, we can say that, but that doesn't mean they're going to buy into it, because they're so relationally conscious that we have to understand that we have to build that trust. And how do we build trust? Building trust means we have to be a little vulnerable. And we don't have to tell them. We overthink that part, right? And that's where the humanity piece comes back, because we have such a scarcity in humanity. And that, how do we build trust, is we have to be willing to be vulnerable, slow down, and build those relationships. They don't need to know your deepest, darkest secrets. They don't need to know if you have a tattoo somewhere, but what are some other things that you do besides tennis that you're being intentional and meaningful about building that connection, which in time builds trust. And then trust, of course, builds positive relationships. It builds healthy mindsets. It builds less anxiety, and we're more likely to be open and share. But in order to do that, that takes a little courage for us to do that. We have to have courage. Well, we also know that right now, all of our students are lacking confidence. And even every single person on here, every day, all day, raise our hand. How many of us struggle with confidence? We do every day, all day, regardless of how many titles, positions, or whatnot that we have. So the other thing that I wanted to share with you is something that you can share with your athletes. And again, it doesn't just have to be towards the female athlete, but even more specifically because of those staggering statistics about the female teenager right now. But to build confidence, I'm going to talk a little bit about how do we build confidence, and we're going to keep it really simple so that you can, again, share this with all of the powers to be of your own family, if you are raising your own children. So when we're talking about confidence, the number one way that we build confidence is by taking the opportunity to be mindful, keep the promises you make to yourself. Oh, that sounds easy, right? But keep the promises that you make to yourself, because we need evidence to build the confidence. And so a lot of times we don't believe in ourselves. We don't think we have the confidence because we're in comparison mode all the time. And we're not even thinking about all the great things that we've done. Because if I asked all of you all by a show of hands, how many of you would be willing to admit that you spend more time thinking about what you don't have, what you can't do, what you're not good at, versus what you do have, what you can do, and what you are good at? Guilty as charged, right? We all fall into that on any given day. And so here's the thing, and I'm not trying to be Debbie Downer. Come on, give me a little laugh on that one, Debbie Downer. But here's the thing, you can't give away what you don't have. And so if we're doing that ourselves, if your teammates are thinking about, again, and they will, if again, we're on campuses across the country, and anytime I ask that, if I said, I'm throwing some truth serum on you, how many would you admit? 99.9% of the students are raising their hand saying, yeah, I tend to do that. And so then we have to have that conversation about, but you can't give away what we don't have. Because how many of us have had somebody on our team, we're like, wait, how the heck did they make this team? Are you kidding me? Because they're only focused on that habit they have, because on average, 42% of your day is based on habit. And so their habit is can't do, don't have, not good at. Then they end up putting that on all of their teammates. They put that on you. They put that on everybody else because that's their habit. So they don't see the good. You know, I mean, I was a scrappy second baseman. My bat was not that good. I was not third, fourth, fifth in the lineup unless they needed somebody to bunt, because I could bunt well and I could run fast, right? And so that was my thing, and I had to own that thing. But I was fortunate that I had people focus on, oh yeah, Deb's got this. But I also had to have enough worth that I knew there were other people that are better than me. And I also needed to tell, well, my parents never came to any of my games. So, but that's where, again, I know you're dealing with the parents, right? But right now we're talking about building your culture in the teams of the people that you're coaching and the people that you're doing your everyday living with, because this goes beyond all of your coaching. And so back to stacking these wins. So we have to change that mindset of sitting down and saying, okay, what's right with you? What are you good at? And have them, start off with practice. Give them 3x5 cards. Have them sit for 2 minutes and say, okay, I want you to write 2 things of why you're a great person. I make them do 15 and they look at me like, huh? But that's why you can say, you can't give away what you don't have. So let's focus on what you do well, and then have them share, have them look people in the eye, put intentionality into them building the connections, so then they can also say, oh yeah, that's right, I forgot that your serve, that's right, you're so good at that part. And pick something and then start with outside of tennis. Don't even talk about tennis. What about you as a human being? And what are some of your hobbies? And so when you start writing down one thing, and then that you realize that you're good at, and that starts building your confidence, because you start stacking the things that you do well. At the same time, you have to start thinking about and stacking, when we said, keep the promises you make to yourself. And it could be as simple as, if you say you're going to get up at 7 o'clock in the morning, get up at 7 o'clock in the morning and write it down. And why do I want you to write it down? And if you did that 7 days in a row, you'll have 7 pieces of evidence. Like, how many of us believed in Santa Claus? Still do, right? Still alive, right? And so why do we believe in Santa Claus? Why do we believe in Santa Claus? Feel free to unmute yourself, yell it out. Why did we believe in Santa Claus? What did your parents do for you? Anybody?
Put presents underneath the tree with Santa Claus's name.
Footprints under the tree, exactly. And then maybe we left the cookies out. We had the cookies out on the table and there were crumbs and somebody ate the cookies. And maybe some carrots were out in the snow, footprints, right? And all of that was what? Evidence, yes or yes? That was evidence. It was evidence that Santa Claus was alive. The same thing happens with our confidence, is we need evidence to build our confidence. So if it might be as simple as, you know what? As a teenager, I haven't been brushing my teeth that well. So I'm going to commit to every day. I'm going to commit every morning. I'm going to brush my teeth when I get up. And they start doing this. They start doing this. They start tracking it. They start tracking it. And you go with those small wins. You've got to start with the small things. So, because the number one, building confidence, the number one way to gain confidence is keep the promises you make to yourself and then track it. Number 2, the best way to keep the promises you make to yourself is start with the small wins. Right? You don't just automatically show up and just be this amazing tennis player. So those small wins, it's like working out, right? I'm a kickbox instructor. I like to teach kickboxing on Saturday morning if anybody ever wants to go. And so I'm going to go to the gym and I've never worked out ever, and I'm going to go start lifting weights. I'm not going to go to the 50 pounds. I'm going to go to the 5 pounds, or I'm going to go to the 5, maybe the 10s. I'm going to work it a little bit, and then I'm going to have progression, right? Progression. And then I'm going to have evidence because I checked off that I went to the gym. And so that's keeping the promises that you make to yourself, but you've got to log it down, because these kids are doing so much, but they're not slowing down to take notice of what they're doing. They're not giving themselves, they're not writing down their wins, whether it's like, oh, hey, I actually did better on that math test than I thought I was going to be, or I actually got to school on time. Write it down. And then you have evidence, just like you have the evidence of the carrots and the footprints and why Santa Claus is real, because there was evidence that said he was real. Okay. The third way for building confidence is confidence is rooted in the intention. Confidence is rooted in the intention and the action itself. And we talked about this in the very beginning, not the outcome. It's in the intention and the action. Because guess what? Nobody shows up in the court trying to fail. Nobody shows up trying to mess up. And these are what all of the other students need to realize, all our other athletes need to realize that, listen, confidence is rooted in the intention and the action itself. You cannot, you know, somebody else is might show up better than you one day. Today, and maybe the five previous times, maybe they weren't as good as you, but then on the sixth time you competing against them, they ended up showing up, and you cannot control the outcome if they showed up better than you, but you can your intentions, and the action itself is, did you do your best, and tracking the evidence. So with all of that coming together, in just a little recap in those, back to those three questions, because I like to recap and then go through any questions or things of that, and if this is helpful to you, is, first of all, leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. Based on a behavior, how we come across, we have the ability to make other people think, feel, and act a certain way. Think about when a new teammate might be coming into your squad, and or think about it as simple as when you're sitting in a room and somebody walks into the room. If there's 10 people in a room and then one person walks into a room, what do we typically do when that one person walks into the room? Like we sit, we stare. We don't even greet them. We don't smile at them. We don't say welcome. The same thing happens in our teams when we're new. It's awkward. We get it, but we have to be intentional about uncrossing our arms, making that social emotional intelligence, right? It's the fancy word for our people skills. It's our eye contact. It's our vibe. It's our energy, and having them be, very aware of that, of their body language. And we communicate in three different ways, right? Communication, visual, verbal, vocal. When we're talking in person, this is what you're dealing with. You're not doing the virtual coaching. Well, you might be, but it's still, face to face. But Dr. Albert Moravian does a whole thing on the decoding of inconsistent communication, because communication is the #1 skill set. You can have the best idea if you can't communicate it properly. And so he talks about the 3 V's, which is the visual, verbal, and vocal. And 93% of our communication is actually our body language and the inflection of our voice. Right. And so again, vibe, energy is our body language, 55% of that. And then the inflection of our voice is 38, so 93%. And you think about it, 7% is actually the words that we use. And if you think about that, remember when mom said, it's not what you said, it's how you said it, and we all swear, I'll never say that to my kids, right? But we do. And so, but that's exactly what we're saying. It's not, and so the words are 7%, but it's how we say that, the inflection. We know when you're yelling, we know when you're mad. And also for most teenagers, yelling doesn't work. A very few do, and we do. And so all this goes for ourselves too, because we get frustrated, right? Like, oh my gosh, what are you doing? What are you thinking? But again, if we have the relationship with them, and I'm not saying we have to be best friends. If we have the relationship with our athletes, if we have our athletes have a relationship with one another, and focus on valuing the strengths and having them tell each other what their strengths are, and slowing down for 5 minutes, then you all hear it all the time, that it's not necessarily all the talent, but when you have the cohesiveness of the entire team together, it's priceless, right? It's priceless. And so leadership is not about positions or titles. It's not about seniority or status. And it's not about being in charge. It's actually about taking care of those in our charge. It's about taking care of those in our charge. Okay. And then the good news is, remember, good news, it's a learnable, practicable skill. Everything that we talked about today is all skill set. All of these, it's just application. It's slowing down, being intentional to put in the effort about the practice of this whole component, right? And then those 3 questions. Let's recap. So we have those 3 questions. Number 1, do you care about me? If we're building intentional connections, if we're building intentional relationships, question number 1 is, do you care about me? Do you smile at me? Do you call me by my name? Do you, are you, and here's the thing, well, we'll go on to that after. And then the second one is, what can you do for me? How do you add value to me? So I would ask you as a coach, or as a peer, as a colleague in your careers, in your family, what is it that you do that you value and shows value to other people? And then question number 3 is, can I trust you? And trust is built on those consistent behaviors. the consistency, and then also at the same time being a little vulnerable. Not our deepest, darkest secrets, but we don't have to know it all. We don't have to. When somebody asks you, how does this work? How does that work? Sometimes we think as the coach, as the adult, that we have to know it all. Well, when somebody pretends that they know it all, what do we call them? A know-it-all. And it's not positive. Okay, it's not positive. And so again, if we're willing to be a little vulnerable about, hey, listen, I don't know about this, but let's find out. Let's check it out, right? And then when, in order to do all of that, that takes courage. Courage is the ability to take action despite one's fear. And in order to do that, we need to build our confidence in ourselves, because we can't give away what we don't have. So in building confidence, and in building not only for ourselves every day, all day, but for your athletes, number one, building confidence. Number one way to gain confidence, to keep the promises you make to yourself and record the win after win after win after win. Do the things that you say you're going to do. Because if you have a peer and you say, hey, next week, let's go to the gym every day. I'll meet you at the gym at 6 a.m. 5 days in a week, 5 days, every day next week. And when said peer doesn't show up the first 2 days, are you going to trust him? No, right? So you got to keep the promises you make to yourself. And then also you have to take responsibility to own up to that if you can't make it. So keep the promises you make to yourself. Number two, the best way to keep the promises you make to yourself is start with the small wins. Don't commit like, I'm going to go to the gym every day next week, and you haven't done a thing in your whole life. And you're not, then let's be realistic, right? That's that whole goal setting thing. But so start with those small wins. And for your students, it might just be, let's start with hydration. How much water are we drinking? You know, we're going into the summer. Let's start with hydration. Let's commit to, can we drink this amount every day? And when they do, log it down. And then you're having evidence. Santa Claus is real. Okay. And then the third is confidence is rooted in the intention and the action itself, not the outcome. The intention and the action itself, not the outcome. Control the controllables, right? You probably have heard that before. Control the controllables. And you can't control other people. You can only influence them and empower them with your leadership skills. And with all of that, to build that confidence, it's just undeniable evidence, and you just keep stacking it and stacking it, okay? The whole brain health with all of the social emotional learning, the anxiety, the stress, all of that brain health, again, is being mindful. Whenever we do trainings, all you have to do is ask them to put it away. And there's no magic wand that's going to help, but if we start with building the foundation, because the foundation of everything is the relationship. And as I started with, is that we have a scarcity in our connectedness. We're even disconnected from ourselves because of the social media. And we have an abundance of disconnectedness, and a scarcity in humanity, because we're not connected and they're socially conscious. And so again, I don't know how much control you have in your practices, in all the things that you do, but I would tell you without a shadow of a doubt, if you could spend 5 minutes to have them being intentional, meaningful and intentional, sit down, connect with one another, start stacking the evidence of them building the relationships with everybody, then I think you're going to have some healthy self-esteem. You're going to have some positive, healthy relationships, and you'll have values that, in order to have those healthy relationships, there are values of what fuels relationships. And I'll end with this. There are 3 values that actually fuel, because again, like I said, we do a values workshop as well, but there are 3 that helps transformation in positive relationships. To have healthy, positive relationships, 3 values, no particular order, that actually support that is, number 1, generosity. Generosity is like the fuel for transformation, right? Because we want these students every day, all day, just to equip them with them becoming the next best version of themselves today, right? And that's always our whole mantra, is equipping them to become the next best version, not 10 days from now, not next year, but how about let's get better today. What is the things that we can do? So generosity, and the generosity is just offering to carry somebody's bag. Let me get the water bottles for you. Hey, how about a smile? You know, be generous with your smile. It doesn't have to be money. It can be our time, right? And so, and I know a lot of you probably all do some things where you give back to the community and you go do a service project or something like that. That all builds self-worth. So generosity is the fuel for transformation. That helps that selfishness. That helps that toxic, self-centered scrolling through the social media that we have. And so by giving to other people, it takes it off of us. So we become a little less selfish and become more selfless. Okay. Number two, for values is humility, right? Humility, humble and kind. Does everybody have that on their Spotify or whatever, Apple Music, whichever one you listen to? I think everybody should have that, humble and kind. But humility, right? The ability to be humble. Nobody, you know, when people are people know when people are cocky, and cocky is rooted from low self-esteem. We all know that, right? As adults, we all know that. But so in order to be humble, that's the spirit of transformation. That's our heart. That's our connectedness, right? And Caroline, that was the mother and son dance at my son's recent wedding. That's so awesome. Oh my God. I have a son, I have twin boys, and I have a son who's getting married in September. So we're really excited. And she's from South Carolina. She is a doll. They both went to the University of South Carolina and Darla Moore School of Business. So it's kind of fun. Squirrel. So number one was generosity. Number two is humility. That's the spirit. And then the third one is integrity. Right. And of course, we know what integrity is, doing the right thing when nobody's watching. We know what that is. Right. But integrity is actually the strength. Like that gives us boundaries. That gives us confidence when there's integrity, because that's the strength of transformation. That honorable. Right. The humility is the wisdom. So the integrity is the strength for transformation. So number one is generosity, two, humility, and number three is integrity. And of course, doing the right thing when nobody's looking. Right. We know what that integrity is. But again, it goes back to hard to do the right thing when you feel the wrong way, because we don't have any evidence. So we need to help these kids stack with evidence, with the small little things that gain them confidence to be able to look people in the eye, to put their phone down, to act with humility, to bring back humanity, because they want to. And hope is not a strategy. I hope this all works itself out. It's not a strategy. We can't hope. It's actually, these are specific action items that one is capable of doing, so that we can bring all of those other statistics down and raise mentally strong students, athletes, because their self-worth and their confidence is raised. And it's not about the outcome, and it's not about the position that they play. I have this conversation with my niece all the time. She plays lacrosse at Holy Cross, and it's always like, do not attach your identity to the sport that you play. It's part of who you are. It's something that you love and that you're passionate about. But if it goes away, you're still Lindsay. And those are the things that we have to constantly remind. But we get so caught up. But we get caught up because we don't take the time to slow down and figure out what's right with us, so we can stack evidence. So it is my pleasure. Hopefully, I know that was probably a lot at you. No fancy PowerPoints. Try to keep it simple, give you some tips and some tools to keep you going. I have a book coming out in July. It's called How You Can. That is being published right now. It's called How You Can. It is a simple book, and it's tips and mindsets for transformation. So the ultimate goal is to continue to becoming the next best version, because leadership is a learnable and practicable skill. It never goes away. It's something that we always have to learn. And so it's How You Can. And what it is, it's 51 tips and mindsets, and each page I had students, I had busy people in mind, I had athletes in mind when we put this all together. So every page is only 100 words, no more than 100 words. Some are like 72 words, and there's 9 different chapters, and it's all, again, tips and tools, so that it's like embracing your essence and having you bet on yourself and understand yourself. So it's everything from responsibility to accountability to empathy to you're not crazy, you're great. If not you, then who is, like if we don't do this, who's going to do it? Limiting beliefs, fear to fearless. And so we've got 9 different chapters that we have in this book coming out, and we'll have some QR codes in that eventually, in the progression of it is to start there and then actually have them be courses because they're universal, and then to have courses that people can take per chapter that we're working on right now to have it come out on our website. So they're courses that you can do, and people can just get them and go off, but we like to keep it simple with a little PDF and fill in the blanks on just, again, 51 different values, tips, and mindsets that build transformation into becoming the next best version of you. So with that being said, Deb Hult, very excited, very happy to be here with you. I saw a lot of you taking a ton of notes and smiling, and I appreciate the interaction. And I will be happy to stick around, answer any questions. If we can do anything for you, my phone number is 603. I will put it right here, 603. And Kelly, maybe if you want to put it in the chat, that'd be great if you can put that in the chat. But 603-315-9783. I live in New Hampshire, actually. 603-315-9783. My website is www.coretrainings.com. www.coretrainings with an S, all one word.com. And my Instagram is @core.trainings, and you can scroll through that, see a lot of different work that we do. And our Twitter is @coretrainings as well. But if there's anything that we can do, you have questions, you need some things in writing, I'm on vacation the rest of this week, but I would be happy to send or share anything that would help you, support you to just empower and get rid of these statistics of 54% of teenage girls are unhappy. So with that being said, my pleasure to be here with you. Any questions, I'll stick around for a bit. And if not, if you're on your lunch hour, enjoy the rest of your day. It's Tuesday, it's Tuesday, it's Tuesday. All right. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Deb.
You're welcome.
Hey, Deb, can I ask you a quick question here to end?
Is it Jacob with a K? Yes.
Yes, it is. So you mentioning your niece Lindsay playing lacrosse at Holy Cross, right? And
Yes,
for
sir.
you guys, it's important to separate. When you get to a certain level, Division I athlete, lacrosse should be such a big part. Shouldn't we embrace that is who she is? And if that's been taken away from her, can we deal it afterwards? Or do you feel like it's a stressful thing for these young adults to really fully commit to who they are? Because she's an athlete and she's a scholar athlete, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I'm dealing with college. I'm not dealing with younger teenagers. So for me, I think you can't do it all, but you can do a few things really, really good.
Yeah. And I think, and you're right. And so not to take away, that is a big part of her world. That's a big part of, it's just like, this is a big part of my world, right? This is it's a part of what I do, but it's not all that I do. So it's that balance, right? Of finding out, because again, it goes back to goals, dreams, and aspirations. My niece wanted to be a D1 lacrosse player, right? And so that was the goal, that was the dream. You've got to put that effort in. And at the same time, let's stack the evidence that you're capable, but also you have to work on the self-worth as well by building self-confidence. So they go together, because yes, that is her world. And not that you want them to focus on, well, if there's something happens to you, because then what are you bringing in? Negative energy, right? You don't want to bring in the negative energy and then let that win, because whatever we focus on is going to win, right? There's two things that are always going to be present in our world, and that's going to be fear/anger or courage. And which one's going to win? The one we feed, right? So we want to feed courage. So for me, it's just also being mindful that, not that I'm promoting if something happened to you, what are you going to do about it? Because right now, and there's seasons, right? So right now you're dealing with athletes. So it is a huge part of them. But at the same time, they need to know that they're also confident in themselves and their ability. So when you do that, they become the better athlete. Yeah. They build the relationships. They become a better teammate. Because I know for her, as when she first started, she gets a lot of playing time. She's really good. She struggled at first because there was so much disconnectedness in the beginning and a lot of meanness. And so she was actually losing for the love of the game at one point. And so that's where we have to be careful of, but this is your dream. That's why we need coaches. That's why we need mentors, right? So that we keep them. So it's not an all or nothing. And then also it's an individual of what the goal is. My whole thing is, when I say that, In the college level is a different level. They have to be bought in. They have to believe in themselves. But they also are in such comparison mode at that level also. So it's finding that worth. So making sure that they do spend time building their identity and who they are as a human. And when you do that, that gives them the confidence and they can go do anything. And I hope that makes sense, Jacob.
Yeah, no, it's really good. I'm trying to filter it through, because relationship and trust is the start with everything, right? So relationship with yourself is really important, of course.
Yes.
My relationship to myself is so healthy.